others in the state of Wisconsin, Governor Thompson.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, love you all. Thank you, David. Thank you, David, for your kind introduction. Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight is a very serious night. Tonight's a night that we Republicans have got an opportunity, like never before, to change the direction of this great country. And we have to do it. And we are going to do it, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you. And that is why, isn't it great to be a Republican? I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce an individual that is my friend, an individual that I have served with, an individual that is extremely intelligent, knowledgeable, and has always been able to do what he set out to do. People say, I gotta vote for this guy or that guy because somebody's got to get enough votes to get the nomination. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there is no candidate that is going to have enough delegate votes going into Ohio to get the nomination. We are going to have a contested convention, and we've had 10. We Republicans have had 10 contested conventions over the life of our party. And only 3 times has the leading candidate won the nomination. There's a gentleman by the name of Abraham Lincoln, which we all know is the father of our party. Went to Chicago in 1860. And he was number 3. And he went to the convention. And he walked out of that convention as our nominee. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that he is by far the best president we have ever had. Abraham Lincoln. And some people say that I'm old enough to know him. I was not. But I'm here tonight to introduce to you, my friends, an individual that I believe has a lot of the characteristics, a lot of the attributes, and a lot of the qualifications that Honest Dave had. Our country was adrift as it is today. Our country was split as it is today. Our country was in need of leadership. There's an individual named John Kasich, ladies and gentlemen, that at the age of 30 went to Congress. And he went to Congress with the idea he was going to change things. And we Republicans believe in that and want that to happen. And John Kasich said, I cannot wait around to become budget chairman. I can't wait for the seniority system. So he ran against the odds and became the budget chairman. And he, ladies and gentlemen, drafted the budget in 1994 that balanced the budget of the United States of America. Not before and never since. And it was John Kasich in his leadership, ladies and gentlemen, that made it happen. Everybody said it couldn't be done. John Kasich did it. Then he decided, ladies and gentlemen, to go into business, and he was successful there. Then he found out that his state of Ohio, like the state of Wisconsin, under Democrat leadership, was adrift. He came back to the state of Ohio, balanced the budget, and today there are $2 billion in surplus in Ohio. He has created 400,000 jobs, full employment, increased the bond rating, helped a lot of people, especially the young and the disabled. John Kasich, ladies and gentlemen, is a leader. He's a doer. And he's the individual that I am so proud to be able to support. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I look at this election as one that is so important, so necessary. John Kasich is the one candidate, ladies and gentlemen, time and time again, poll after poll, beats Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders by over 10 points. And like we, ladies and gentlemen, like we cannot afford another 4 years of Democrat leadership. There is only one candidate that definitely will win. And as Bill Buckley said, the father of our conservative movement, vote for the conservative that can win. And that's John Kasich, ladies and gentlemen. John Kasich can win and will win. And we are going to the Super Bowl. The Green Bay Packers are going to the Super Bowl. The University of Badgers are going to go to the Rose Bowl. We're going to win the Final Four next year, and we're going to have John Kasich, ladies and gentlemen, as the President of the United States. I need your help. Let's get behind the wheel. The Super Bowl champion, John Kasich. For your four-term governor. People always wonder, how could you bring that Congress together and how can you get things done? I want to tell you that I just had the man that runs the Serbian hall come to me and introduce himself and say, my wife and I voted for you. Now, let me also tell you that back in 1977, when I was an awfully young man running for the state legislature, I sat down with another man who reminded me of him. Now, this man had shock white hair and piercing blue eyes, and he called me into his office. And you'll understand why I said this. He said, young man, you know that I'm Serb. I said, yes, sir, I know that. And he said, and I happen to know that you're Croatian. Why don't we set that aside for the rest of this election and let's win an election and move forward. So I brought it together twice, the Serbians and the Croats. If you can do that, you can bring anybody together. So I want you to know just a little bit about me, because I just heard that about 38% of people that live in this state don't really know anything about me to even form an opinion. It's pretty interesting. I guess that's what happens when you're positive all the time and you don't enter a demolition derby, but I'm glad I didn't. Let me also tell you that I grew up the reason why I'm so comfortable here is I grew up in a blue-collar town outside of Pittsburgh called McKees Rocks. And it was blue-collar. Frankly, I don't remember meeting a Republican when I was a young man. They were all Democrats. My father was a Democrat. He carried mail on his back, delivered mail to our home for almost 30 years. His father was a coal miner. My grandfather died of black lung. And as he was getting older, he was losing his eyesight because of the time he spent in the mine. My mother's mother
could barely speak English. She was Croatian, and she was an immigrant. And it was hard to communicate with her, really, because she just had very few things that she could say. My mother, I was told just a couple weeks ago, because as ethnics, there's two ways to think about yourself as an ethnic. You either think of yourself as somebody that kind of clings to that and honors it all the time, or somebody that says, we're going to put that beside us and we're going to become Americans. And my mother was one that said, we're going to emphasize the fact that we are Americans. We didn't know a lot about the history until my cousin a couple weeks ago told me that in my mother's family, there were four. Her sister, and two brothers. And three of them never moved beyond the 8th grade. My mother walked across a footbridge over a railroad track to get her high school diploma. My childhood was one of common sense, God-fearing, playing by the rules, and my mother and father always told me, Johnny, you believe you can change the world. And what's most important is wherever you are, you make the world a little bit better place for the fact that you were there. They also so strongly believed in what America represents, the ability of people to really be able to rise. And I got my values there, but I have to tell you that in that little town of Keys Rocks, it's a town where if the wind blew the wrong way, people found themselves out of work. You see, I understand people who are Donald Trump voters. Because let me tell you who they are and what they worry about. They worry about the fact that they could lose their job, that they're 52 years old, and somebody walks in one day and says you're out of work, or frankly, some politician did something to create some agreement and somehow they lost out. Or there are people who say, I've been playing by the rules, I've been working, and I can't get a pay raise. My grandfather, when he worked in that coal mine, would come up at the end of a long day and he would think he'd get good pay, and they'd say, but you only brought up half of coal and the other was peat, and you're only going to pay you for the coal you brought up. It was the ripoff. And there are many people in this country who feel as though they're experiencing the ripoff. They put their money in a bank. It used to be you get interest for it. The bank uses your money and they pay you. Today we get no interest for it. And what they really worry about more than anything else, what they really worry about is that their sons and daughters went to college to get an education because they were told that if your kids get educated, they're going to have a better life. And now their kids are still living at home without a job, but with big debt. You see, this anxiety is something that people feel very strongly about. And they're looking for a vehicle to express their frustration. I've got to tell you that those people that I grew up with in the Keys Rocks, who played by the rules, and things rarely worked out in a special way for them, are the people that have been in my mind's eye since I was a young politician. I've always been independent, and I must tell you, the Republican Party has been my vehicle and not my master. The Republican Party has given me an opportunity to be able to contribute to our society. But I've always been an independent operator, somebody that's looked at problems and not really been concerned about who I may be upsetting on the way. I was a young state senator. Yeah, they raised the pay. I ran a campaign that said we shouldn't. So when the pay raise passed, I could take it. The Republicans said that they needed to raise taxes. I ran a campaign that said we should have no tax increases. And when we won the majority in the state Senate at the age of 28, they decided to raise taxes. I said, no, I promised that I wouldn't. And they said, well, you're irresponsible. I said, really? Then I'll write my own budget for the state of Ohio. And I had people sneaking in to see me in the middle of the night, tell me how we could improve the government of the state of Ohio. I didn't win that budget fight, but I kept my promise and I kept my word. And I made breakthrough suggestions that ultimately got adopted into the law. I left the state Senate. They took my district away from me. They wanted to end my career when I was very young, but at the age of 30, I ran for Congress. You see, in 1976, I had campaigned side by side with Ronald Reagan at the 1976 convention. And Ronald Reagan, see, I actually knew and worked with Ronald Reagan. And he was an inspiration to me. And what he taught me were a couple things. One, you have to have strength when it comes to our national security. And secondly, you've got to give people an incentive to work and to give them the opportunity to rise. So in 1982, I ran for the Congress at 30 years of age, and I ran on the Reagan agenda. There weren't many people running on the Reagan agenda. In fact, they were all running away because the economy was not doing very well. And I ran against a Democrat incumbent on the basis of the fact that we could cut taxes, shrink government, rebuild our defense, and destroy the Soviet Union. And in 1982, there was only one Republican candidate for the United States Congress who defeated an incumbent Democrat, and that person was John Kasich, me. And I went to the Congress of the United States, and I had an amazing career. You know, I served on the Armed Services Committee for 18 years. And let me tell you, these are difficult times. There's no time for on-the-job training. Being a United States Congressman at the age of 30, in 1983, I worked with Republicans and conservative Democrats to rebuild America's military. And through that experience, I worked with my friends to reform the Pentagon, to change the very operation of that building, with the members of Congress who were committed to a strong national defense. And I was there, and I remember the night that because of the strength of Ronald Reagan, that Berlin Wall came tumbling down. That was an amazing time in American history. I was also there when I saw the Arab Muslims line up with the West to push Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait in the first Gulf War. And I remember when we won so decisively and people said we should have gone to Baghdad to complete the job. And I remember how smart George H.W. Bush was with his advisors in not going to Baghdad, getting the job done and coming home. And I was called into the Pentagon after 9/11 by Secretary Rumsfeld with the former Secretaries of Defense. And from that meeting forward, for a number of years, I led people who were technology experts into the Pentagon to deal with our technology problems. Think about that arc. All the way from defeating the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall collapsing to a united coalition of Arabs and Westerners to defeat Saddam Hussein, all the way to the brutal attacks on 9/11. That's why I'm prepared to understand what we need to do today. Well, 6 years into my term as a congressman, I found myself on the Budget Committee. I was complaining that the Republicans and the Democrats weren't serious about balancing the budget. I only wanted to balance the budget for two reasons. The immorality of leaving debt to our children, and number two, that I knew that if you could balance a budget and you could reduce some taxes, you could put yourself in a position where you could have economic growth. Because what I learned as a young man were three things that were priorities: creating jobs, creating more jobs, and creating all the jobs you could. Because it's through job creation that allows people to recognize and realize their God-given purpose in life to change the world and to live out their destiny. So I knew that fighting to balance the budget was the right thing to do. But it didn't come easy. It took 10 years of my efforts and the efforts of the team that I built to get us to the point where we actually balanced the federal budget for the first time since man walked on the moon. We paid down the largest amount of the publicly held debt in modern history, $500 billion. We also were in a position of where we had a $5 trillion budget projected surplus. It could have been used to fix Social Security, and there was no discussion at that time about income inequality and the lack of rising wages. Because when we finally balanced the budget, cut taxes, restored some common sense in Washington, we had an explosion of economic growth, and it was a glorious time in my life. I had created a goal, and I had met it. And after being in a position of seeing us succeed militarily and be able to balance our budget, leaving surpluses behind, I left Washington because I've never wanted to be a professional politician. In fact, I don't even like politics. And I left for 10 years. And I did a variety of things that gave me more experience. And some of you will remember me from the glory days and when I was a giant television star at Fox News. I know you remember. Anyway, I went out for 10 years, and I was having a great time, and I didn't want to go back into politics, but I got a call. Have any of you ever had a call? It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a text. It wasn't an email. You see, I think when the Lord blesses you and gives you so much, you can barely contain yourself. You also begin to understand about your responsibility to continue to do things that can change the world. The call was I needed to go back in and run for governor. I ran at the perfect time. Things couldn't get much worse in Ohio. We had lost 350,000 jobs. Our credit was going down the drain. We were 20% of our operating budget in the hole. And I went to New York and they told me that we were going to cut off your credit cards because Ohio's about dead. So I ran in that election. And I had never run statewide before in the state of Ohio. The only time before that somebody who had never run statewide had defeated an incumbent was 96 years earlier. And I thought, well, it's about time for somebody else to do it. And I ran and I won. And people said you couldn't fix it. They said we needed to raise taxes and expand government. Well, let me tell you what we did. I've cut taxes as the governor of the state more than any governor in America, including no income tax for small business, killing the death tax so that people could pass their businesses on to their family. And now that we've done that, we're working on killing death. We haven't made a lot of progress on that, but we're working at it. Cut taxes more than anybody. Our budget deficit went from 20% in the hole, or $8 billion worth of deficits, to today, a $2 billion surplus. And we went from a loss of 350,000 jobs to now a gain over 400,000 jobs, with wages growing faster than the national average. To know that we have left no one behind, because we believe it is immoral for the mentally ill to sleep under a bridge or live in prison. And we believe that people who have drug addictions can be rehabilitated, and in our prison system we're doing just that, with an 80% success rate of rehabbing people who are drug addicted in the prisons. And we believe the working poor, instead of being punished for working harder, ought to be rewarded. And we believe that developmentally disabled ought to be fully mainstreamed. And as a result of that, I ran for re-election, and I won 86 out of 88 counties, and I won by 30 points in a state where it takes us 2 or 3 days to figure out who actually won the election. So I decided over time to run for president. You know why? Because there's 2 critical issues in the country today. Economic strength. As the Budget Committee Chairman in Washington, we had massive economic expansion and tremendous job growth and hope. In Ohio, I entered in a very, very tough time. And now people across the state are hopeful again, where people are getting work, where our children can have a future. And you see, that model's not complicated. It just takes guts. What it means is that you have common sense regulations so that you do not crush small business. And I will have a program that will freeze all federal regulations for 1 year, except for health and safety, force the Congress to vote on regulation that bureaucrats are writing laws which they have no right to do, and begin to unwind the regulations that are stomping on small business and keeping us from having the kind of economic growth we want in this country. Secondly, we need to reduce taxes on corporations that have seen fit to invest their profits in Europe, because we punish them if they come back. Oh yes, we can cut the corporate tax rate, and we can stop double taxing businesses. How do I know it? Because I know it because I've been in business. And we need to reduce the individual tax rate. But we got to do it in such a way that we can pass it. And we can go to the old Reagan model of 28, 25, 10% with the capital gains at 15, provide incentives, and we can make the tax code simpler and clearer and realistically being able to pass. And I will put us on a path to a balanced budget, as I have in the past, with no third rails, no problems with dealing with entitlements, with innovation, and I want you to know one other other thing. I will shift welfare, education, Medicaid, job training, and infrastructure back to the states so the states can provide the program and innovation and change that we all seek. I shift the power, money, and influence on our lives. And what I also would like you to know as I get ready to leave the stage here is that it does matter who's the president. I remember when Ronald Reagan said it was morning in America, that we were a shining city on a hill. Or you think I don't know about what Winston Churchill said about never, 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 ever give up? Of course I know. But the strength of our country does not rest in the president. The strength of our country rests in us. When I was a kid, we didn't worship presidents. Our hero was Roberto Clemente, the great baseball player, who gave up his life trying to help earthquake victims in Nicaragua. Took a plane that was not safe and died. And I remember the morning when my mother came into my room, one of the very few times I watched my mother cry, because children don't like to see their mother cry. It's unsettling. And my mother came in and said, "Our hero died last night." You see, I remember back in the Keys Rocks that we didn't wait for somebody to come in on a white horse to try to save us. The strength of our country rests in our families. It rests in our communities. It rests in our neighborhoods. You want to fix your schools? You want to make sure that your kids are getting the skills they need? Then go do it. Don't wait for somebody else in Madison or somebody down in Washington to come. You do it. Change the world. You want to fight the problem of drug abuse in this state? You grab a kid and tell that young man or that young woman that they've got a God-given purpose that will be obscured and destroyed if they cave to the evils of drug addiction. Can you change it? You better believe it. We have a program called Start Talking. We start talking to kids, and we all need to, all across this country. And we don't need to wait for bureaucrats or government officials. We do it in our churches, our synagogues, our community organizations, and our schools. And you want to fight poverty? You have a welfare office that brings the businesses in, and when a person comes in to get the welfare check, you train them for the job of the businesses that are located in the welfare office. You don't have to wait for anybody else. You go do it. People in Milwaukee didn't wait to fix their schools, by the way. They fixed them because they drove change and innovation, and they took matters into their own hands. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lord's made us all special for a purpose. To live a life bigger than ourselves. And when we live a life bigger than ourselves, if we're a nurse that spends 15 extra minutes with a family when the nurse is dead tired and tells the family it's going to be okay. Or a teacher, the most underpaid people on the face of the earth, who give up pay to change kids' lives. I'll give you another way you change the world. You have a lady who was married for 50 years. Her husband died. Her phone doesn't ring anymore. You call her on Monday. You say, "We're taking you to dinner on Saturday night." And you know where she's going on Thursday, don't you? She's going to get her hair done. And somehow when Saturday night comes, despite the fact that she slept on it Thursday night and Friday night, that hair's just still perfect. And when you pick her up, did you change the world? You did. You see, folks, let's stop thinking about where we fall short. Let's stop thinking about all that's wrong. And let's celebrate the great fact that America's best days are ahead of them if we remember the formula that made us great. And it's not very complicated. It just takes leadership, it takes guts, and it gets a leader to remind all of the people who make the laws in this country that you may be a Republican, you may be a Democrat, but before any of that, You are an American. You are an American that is there to change the world and give everybody a chance to realize our God-given purpose. I become president, I'll fix the economy. But for you, you restore the spirit of America in your families, neighborhoods, and communities by changing the world in which you live. Thank you all very much.